We'll open the meeting for the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency for December 13th. It is a little after 3 o'clock.
Oh, there she is.
Well,
Good. Chuck told me you were going to be remote. Okay. Glad you're here.
I feel like it.
Item 1, which is our roll call. So Amy, would you like to do the roll call?
You betcha. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll start with the roll call for the December 13th meeting. We'll start with Board Member Commenti.
Here.
Board Member Rickert.
Here.
Board Member Modi.
Here.
Board Member Browning.
Here.
Board Member Mazzano.
Present.
Board Member Schrader.
Here.
And Chair Watkins.
Present.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Face the north.
North.
Which way is it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. Little, would you introduce the staff that are here remotely, I assume?
Yeah, they're all next door in the office, but, and they'll come in as they do their presentations. You heard from Amy Lindsay, our administrative assistant. We have Michael Cooker, our associate planner, Dan Wayne, senior planner, Sean Tejan, senior planner, Jen Paulum, senior planner. And I'm leaving somebody out. It's hard when I don't see their faces. I think that covers all of them. I'm going to get in trouble if I forgot one though. Okay.
Okay, we are on item 4, which is a public comment period, and we've set this aside just for people to be able to address the board, and we won't take any item on any of these discussions. And if anybody is present, we're going to limit you to 3 minutes. So, Michael, do we have anybody signed up for public comment via Zoom?
Yes, Mr. Ed Merrick requested a public comment time. He's being promoted to panelist now. Ed, go ahead and unmute your mic when you're ready.
And Mr. Chairman, while that's happening, Jessica Carlson is with us, our Chief Fiscal Officer. So maybe I won't get in trouble.
Okay. Okay, Ed, you are on.
Actually, I thought I made it clear. To Amy, I want to comment on number 12.
Oh, you want to wait for number 12?
Yeah, unless, yeah, that because it's on.
Okay, well, that's always better. It's always better to address the topic when the topic comes up.
Okay,
Yes,
our mistake.
Okay, so is there anybody else in queue for public comments?
I do not see anyone.
Okay, we'll close the public comment period then. We're now on the consent calendar, item 5. And we're going to vote on all these with one motion unless somebody has a reason to pull an item. But as of now, I've heard number 5.1 is just to approve the minutes from the Board of Directors meeting. 5.2 was the schedule of future meetings. 5.3 is to approve cash disbursements from $373,000. Item 5.4 is a correspondence, which is information only. 5.5 is an update on the Shasta Connect transit services. And I think it addresses the Sunday on demand, but it also mentions the new service that will be starting that goes from Bernie to Fall River and Casella and MacArthur that begins in February 2022. And then 5.6 is an approve and update on SRTA procurement policies. And they are minor changes that Jessica Carlson is proposing. And 5.7 is receive an update on the joint MPO land use model project, authorizing the executive director to sign that agreement. And that's simply to let us join with 5 other agencies and prepare a joint report rather than us preparing our own. And then 5.8 is the quarterly comprehensive budget report. And Jessica Carlson says we have sufficient funds to cover our budgeted expenses of $3.7 million.
So moved.
I have one question or comment.
Okay,
Could you give me a little more information about item 5.5, the Intermountain Area Service that'll go into effect February 2022? And is that something I can talk about in my column? I write a weekly column for the Intermountain News.
Yeah, and we get Sean in here who's been working on it directly, but it's moving along and there's no reason to think it won't
Okay.
happen.
Right here.
Oh,
And
man.
there he is.
Hide in the hallway.
He's
That's
great.
fast.
But yeah, just a quick
okay,
update. of where
Sean, give
we're
us a little update on that.
Yeah, so where we're at with that is we've been working with Indie Health Connected Living and via the site provider to expand a service area in that area, Bernie Castle, Fall River, and MacArthur. That is going to be a Monday through Friday service. They're going to have one bus up there that can operate also in the snow. They have hired a driver. They're working on training right now. We're scheduled for a January, February launch of that service, Monday through Friday. Dignity Health is working to figure out what the hours exactly will be. And then we'll be able to provide that service during that time, starting for a while. We have the low carbon transit operations program money that we have for expanded services is going to help offset a lot of the costs of that initially just started in the launch.
And you will be announcing the times when the bus will be in different areas, or how it works in the newspaper and the Intermountain News?
Correct. Yeah, we're gonna dig down and figure out what the information is going to be. Once we have that, we'll probably work with SRTA, our marketing advertiser, to help us develop a flyer
Sure.
to distribute. And then Dignity Health has a staff person that goes up there a couple times a week.
Right.
They'll start distributing the information, the flyers, to a bunch of agencies they already work with. And we know, they know if folks already interested in the service. So we've already got a group of people to get that out to.
Just a tip, the most effective means of communication in Bernie and Fall River Valley is to put flyers up in the post offices. That's how you know everything that goes on is the post office door.
Yep.
So
Got it.
communities, that's how we function. But thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you foresee that as being Monday through Friday, 8 to 5? You got one driver, right, who's going to work an 8-hour day?
Yeah, so currently the services they provide here in just around the Reading area is about 7:30 to 3:30. That's been the typical operation hours that they've had. How they will do that, they'll have to see in terms of the operating hours that they have available. With only having one driver, there will be some time where it just won't be available for that person to take their lunch breaks and those types of things where it will be down. But maybe close to that. I'll know some more in about a month.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Sean. So approval of the consent calendar has been moved by Mr. Browning.
I'll
and I think
second.
Mary,
I'd love to second it.
Free?
Is that okay?
oh, I thought you'd already done that.
No, I did. I said you had 3 that did the second.
Yeah.
He made the motion.
Oh, I thought Mary said, I second it and I have questions.
Yes, she did. That's right. Yeah, but.
Oh,
good
there we
job.
go.
Okay,
I just-
well, anyway,
I snuck
we're
that
going to
in.
give Mary the second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Win.
So Amy, we'll let you do a roll call and make sure everybody's here.
Okay, let's start with Board Member Commenti again.
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
We are now moving on to item 6, which is the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you. I have 4 items. One is you've heard about the infrastructure bill, so I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about that, and I will at a very high level. Probably the best way it can be characterized as a little bit of more money for everything, in some cases a lot more money. So public transit, streets and roads. There's also a special emphasis, kind of like the state of California, in special pots of money for resiliency and zero emission infrastructure, like charging infrastructure, hydrogen fueling. The other thing that's significant to note in there is there is a lot of movement from formula funds towards grants, and that's what we've been seeing in the state too. So it's going to keep us really busy if we want to keep trying to get the funds that we need to come to our region, that will be working even more so on grants than we already do. And the other thing is where in past infrastructure bills, these happen about every 6 years. There's been movements to kind of diminish the role of metropolitan planning organizations, which is what they recognize us as, that are smaller in size, under 200,000 urban area population. And this took a complete reversal of that, where now they're recognizing the importance of the smaller metropolitan planning organizations. They used to have different rules for us being smaller, but now they're not, and that's a good thing, and that more money will come to us directly. So for example, active transportation, we could still apply for grants, but we might get a pot of money that comes to us that we can spend as we choose. So a lot of the way these work is once they pass, there'll be about a year of guidance and things, and FHWA and FTA trying to figure out how to make it all happen, sometimes more than a year. And some guidance will be rolling out, and I'll be sharing that with the agencies as we go. And then on the hydrogen fuel cell, we had a workshop a while back, as you recall, about the potential for hydrogen fueling in the area and how we could use that. It's been a little bit of movement on it. We did a request for proposals, and evidently it wasn't enough money. We put in $50,000, and just like hiring people right now, hiring consultants is also tough right now. So we didn't get any nibbles on that, but we do have a relationship with what's called the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership, which is a nonprofit, and they've been really good about keeping us engaged. I have a call with them tomorrow, getting us connected to the right people. And one of the people they helped connect us with is a group applying for a statewide grant to do zero emission vehicle outreach for heavy trucks and passenger cars. And they need host areas around the state, and they want to do the Reading area as a host area, and asked if we would participate in the grant. And I said we would. It would mean funding coming to our area, but they do most of the legwork. They actually bring up fuel cell trucks and things like that. They bring different cars that people can drive, passenger cars. So that should be a good event. Now we just got to work out the details over the coming months if they get that grant to run that host function, and maybe pair it up with another activity that you guys might think of, like the Reading Whole Earth and Watershed Festival or something like that. Also, you might have read in the paper that there's a hydrogen manufacturing facility going into Stillwater Park. And I have been in touch with Todd Jones at the Economic Development Corporation. He's very on top of this. This is almost as much in his wheelhouse as it is ours. So I'm looking forward to seeing that kind of partnership going forward, and still just kind of seeing where this goes. But like I mentioned, the infrastructure bill there could be significant funding if we can kind of put it all together here. There's a lot of moving parts. And then the third one I want to mention is Chairman Watkins, this is your third term, I believe, as chairman of the agency. And I think it'd be remiss, and this will be your last meeting chairing, but you've done a very excellent job of reading the information in the agendas, asking questions, keeping the public engaged, keeping staff engaged. And I really appreciate that. And I know the staff appreciates that too. So thank you very much. I'm sure the board agrees with that.
Thank you.
Maybe they won't by the time I comment at the end of this meeting.
We can always kick you out.
Okay. Yeah, they can always change their mind, and we can revoke
Wait,
everything.
this is not a recall election.
Well, it could be. I'm getting pretty good at that.
Experience with it, you know.
And then the last item is, I've talked to all of you individually and most all of our partner agencies that I'll be retiring. I announced my intent to retire, so I am looking forward to that. And I will be around for a while till we can find the replacement, do that recruitment, which we'll be talking about later in the meeting. So I don't want to get mushy just yet, but you do get a little reflective as you get towards retirement. And I really do appreciate the relationships that I've been able to build with all of you board members and what we've been able to accomplish together. So I am still looking forward to the next few months working with you. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. We'll move on to item 7. If any board members have been to a meeting, we're required to report it. Has anybody attended a meeting where they're paid for by SRTA? I don't believe there are any, so we will move on to item 8. And this is a public hearing to approve the Shasta 2022 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which we call RTIP, and update project selection priorities. So Dan.
Yeah, thank you. I won't belabor the projects because we talked about them at the October meeting and there's only been one change since that time. So this, for just a quick overview, every 2 years, we get shares from the California Transportation Commission that we can program towards eligible projects. And in this case, we have new share balances of $6 million that we're putting towards different projects. One of which this board's already actually approved, but now we're adding additional money. And that's the active transportation in Cottonwood where a grant was received. And this is to meet our 10% match commitment that we pledged to the county. So additional $1.167 million. The other is just a prior carryover of $100,000 for the Turtle Bay to downtown, another active transportation project. The remaining balance of our guaranteed shares, $4.581 million, is to go towards construction of the Interstate 5 project north of Reading. And that's something I've talked with you about before. It'll probably be a subject of the February meeting to deal. A lot of it is just to deal with the goods movement snarls that we have when there's closures like there might be tonight on Interstate 5. And I'd like to have a little bit of a workshop in February about just ideas and what Caltrans has been talking about that, might be good solutions. Nothing's gonna, fix it, but some things might help make it easier on our local streets and roads when those trucks and cars have nowhere to go. So this obviously doesn't fund the entire project. The entire project is, I think, north of $80 million. It's a cable that's attached. But now the state allows us to program partial funds, and this is everything we have, with the thought that we can then apply for grants. So we will be applying for a grant to hopefully get the whole thing and combine that with other Caltrans resources and make that project happen. And then the last one that's changed is, it's not on the bullet, but it's in the last paragraph. There are shares that we get that aren't guaranteed. They're called maximum shares. The CTC can say no, but if they have capacity, they could do that. And it's for the North Reading Active Transportation Project. This is a project you've seen before that we applied for an active transportation grant. That grant was very close to funding, but was not funded. We will be applying again. And really, I wouldn't announce this too much in Sacramento, but really it's a placeholder. It's money that's 5 years out. If we don't program something now, we'll have to wait, and that money is going to be available 7 years out. It very well could go to this project, especially if we were able to get a grant. But the point being is it's 5 years out, and if something changes, we can reallocate the money 2 years from now, and we're doing this exercise all over again towards another project. And then the last item is just some priorities that we had quite a while ago on how we, what guidance we use to select projects for this program. That's an attachment E. I made some very minor changes with it, really just to update it to more statewide priorities. And those are in section 3 and 4 of those priorities. So I'm looking for your approval of this program, approval of the selection priorities. It is a public hearing. And with approval, we will forward it down to the California Transportation Commission along with the other regions, and it will get approved this spring, hopefully, as part of the bigger statewide transportation improvement program, and we can begin to see these funds put to use.
Okay, I think before we open the public hearing, we'll open it to any board members to ask any questions they might have. So does any board member have a specific question?
I love the name, the Cottonwood Active Transportation Trunk Line Express.
You like cattle?
I like cattle. That's so appropriate for Cottonwood.
Oh, okay, Dan, I explained again how the improved I-5 North has to have another projects put in so that we stay in the 5-year queue and not the 7-year queue.
Yeah, it's not so much for the Interstate 5 project. It's just that we have these regional shares of money. And this RTIP, I call it the RTIP, it's a 5-year program. And any money that's available, any new money, it's 5 years out. It's not available next year or the year after that because it's already spoken for in prior cycles. And so if we don't put that money in the 5th year of the program today, 2 years from now, we'll be looking and trying to put that money in the program. And they're going to say the same thing 2 years from now, that money is going to be 5
5
years
years
out.
out.
So if we program something now, a project we have a legitimate shot at, then that money will be set in that place for us to hopefully use for that project, but maybe for other projects.
Okay, we will open the public hearing then. So Michael, has anybody weighed in on this?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing then.
Greg, just for record, there's nothing on the public communication email either.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
I'll make a motion that we approve staff recommendations, to approve the RTIP project selection priorities, the resolution, and authorize the executive director to make any necessary modifications.
And I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Kristen and seconded by Mary. We'll do a roll call vote with you, Amy.
Okay, Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. It passes unanimously. We are now on item 9, which to approve a preliminary regional planning priority for fiscal year 22-23. This is our overall work program. So Dan Wayne.
You can either do it there, Dan, or right here. There's sound at either spot.
Not in the screen.
Get the back of your head.
Okay, that's good. That's something. So as all board members, thank you, by the way, as all board members, I'm sure are aware, every December, we come to you with regional planning priorities for the next fiscal year, starting July 1. So this is part of the annual process that we go through. Regional planning priorities represent, in my mind, the middle step. On one end, we have the regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy and our special plans like modal plans. And then on the other end, we have the overall work program of specific work elements and deliverables and products and the allocation of resources. And the regional planning priorities are sandwiched in between that. And that's kind of your opportunity to review and to approve as we go from the high level to the specific plans and investments that we make. Attached to my staff report are proposed regional planning priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Just for reference, there's also a summary of what our current priorities are, progress that we've made towards those. In short, these regional planning priorities that are proposed can be grouped into a few categories. One is the continued pursuit of full funding for the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project on I-5 North Reading. Another one is the implementation of recent and soon to be completed plans. And that includes, for example, the long-range transit plan, a Go Shasta active transportation plan, a resilient Shasta climate adaptation plan, and those types of efforts. It also, we're focusing as well on carrying out recently funded plans, plans that we've received grants on, but we haven't started yet, including the State Route 273 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan and a North State Bus to Rail Plan. We're also working on updating our disadvantaged communities analysis, where we spatially gain a better understanding of where disadvantaged communities are and what their needs are. And that's important to us when we're seeking grant funds, because that's one of the key scoring criteria is what benefits do our projects have for those disadvantaged communities. And lastly, exploring some new planning initiatives. These include vehicle miles traveled mitigation bank study. This is one of our potential sustainable community strategies that we've discussed previously with the board. We're also looking at an expanded view of the North State I-5 corridor. We've been working, as you know, for a long time towards improvements on I-5 and Shasta, but a lot of the types of issues that we're dealing with right now, they need to be solved at a larger scale than just Shasta. We can hopefully implement in conjunction with our partners to the south some improvements that would reduce the impacts, the local impacts, when there's closures on I-5 or other restrictions. We're also working on identifying we're calling an integrated work program or a crossover project. We have a lot of efforts that are going on. I guess you could say a little bit in silos. And we're looking at where can we take all of those different types of investments and efforts, not only that we're doing, but that our local agency partners are doing in the private sector and nonprofits, and where can we focus multiple layers of investment and planning and incentives in a specific area to really make those projects performance benefits of those projects really stand out. So that's something we've been talking about for a while, but we're trying to identify what that would be. So for example, you would bring together a transit project, an active transportation project, a redevelopment project, an economic development project, and really bring all those stakeholders together, combine their resources and leverage one another's efforts to do something maybe bigger than we could do individually. And then lastly, supporting the development of zero emission infrastructure. There's an agenda item that Sean has later on in the agenda talking about this in part, and as Ben Little mentioned before, there's new funding available in this arena too. Something we continue to have our finger on. Board comments and approvals, staff will work to turn these priorities into draft work elements with tasks and deliverables and budgets that we'll present to you in February. And then that will be followed by a final and complete overall work program in April. I'm here to receive any comments that you might have and answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So any comments or questions for Dan?
I have one, Dan. This North State Intercity Bus System Business Plan, is that still the same plan about going to Sacramento? Is that?
Yeah, perhaps Dan can, yeah.
Where are we with that?
Yeah, the update you received a while back, I think 2 meetings ago, nothing's changed unfortunately since then. You'll recall that we had our operational funds rescinded.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're still waiting to hopefully get those restored, and maybe with this new transit money in the infrastructure bill, that can happen.
Mhm.
But essentially it's in limbo right now until we know we can operate it.
Anybody else? So Dan, the vehicle miles traveled, the bank that you're going to, would SRTA actually hold the bank and let people get credits?
I don't think we would necessarily have a very direct, if any, role in that. It's more, it was something that the city of Reading brought up as something that we could include as a strategy for reducing vehicle miles traveled and the greenhouse gas emissions from that. So it's kind of a win-win. We could use it for our sustainable community strategy, and the city could use it to help satisfy some of their requirements based on new development that Oftentimes, the city will have a development proposal that they would like to approve for its impacts. And in order to mitigate for those impacts, they can, pay into a fund that would pay for reductions elsewhere in the community. Kind of like environmental, when you have environmental impacts, move things around and still have the same net benefit.
The developer would pay into it.
Yeah, the developer, otherwise, they would pay into it as a way to mitigate the impacts of their project, just like they would if they had environmental impacts. And that allows them to move forward with their projects, but still have the net benefit of the performance that we need.
So then, if you had a project and people were driving electric vehicles, do electric vehicles count for vehicle miles traveled?
Yes, they do. Obviously, they don't count towards the green
Emissions, but they would for capacity on roadways.
Yeah, they do have a traffic impact, obviously, and they drive on the same roads and park and just like regular vehicles.
Okay, anybody else? So we need to approve the plan, the OW3 plan.
I'll second.
Okay, Kristen moved and Modi seconded. Amy?
Okay, we'll start with the roll call vote. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickert,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Amy. We are moving on to item number 10, which is receive a presentation on the Resilient Shasta Extreme Climate Event Adaptation Plan and to provide comments. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I'm promoting our consultant, Chris Gillespie from Energetics to panelist. I'm going to speak real briefly on a recap on the project, and then he'll jump into presenting on the adaptation plan. So I'm going to share my screen here and hopefully this.
So we see it?
That's Chris's screen. I'm going to kind of interrupt him here real quick. So there we go. And then slideshow, play from start. Okay. Can you folks see that okay?
Yes.
You're probably seeing the presenter view, huh?
Yeah, it's not the full slide view.
Yeah. We'll have to muddle through if it's still legible.
Yes.
So just a quick background on this effort. We applied for and received a Caltrans adaptation planning grant in 2019. In 2020, we issued an RFP and contracted with Energetics that December. We were last before the board in April of this year, where we presented a draft vulnerability assessment to the board for comment. And that contained two different scenarios that were evaluated using standard models. And so this is a two-prong effort. We kind of based it on the approach that Caltrans District 2 did for the state highway network in their area. And now we've begun work on the adaptation plan on how to address the challenges identified in the vulnerability assessment. And that's where my consultant, Chris, is going to go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Michael. And good afternoon to the Shasta Regional Transportation Agency, Chairman Watkins and Director Little. I appreciate this moment while I get this slideshow up. All right. So thank you, Michael, for that quick overview of the background. To put this within a timeline very quickly, we're in this phase 3 of the project.
Chris, we still can't see your slideshow, so you know.
All right, thank you for letting me know. There we go. How about that?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So this has been 3 phases so far. We're in phase 3. We're rounding the final corner here. We've synthesized the findings of our vulnerability assessment and the adaptation plan, and we're in the process of incorporating final stakeholder feedback. We're currently waiting on some feedback, particularly from the county, but from other stakeholders as well. Following that, we'll finalize the recommended adaptation strategies and have a final report. Let's see if we can skip to the next slide here. So in the previous presentation to the board, we showed the findings of the vulnerability assessment. So I'm not going to linger on these very long. However, I will very quickly highlight the particular focus on the hazards associated with wildfire. Showing again here, these are maps showing projected future probability of wildfires. A, B, C, D goes through time. So this is the historical, followed by 2025, 2055, and 2085, with the color scale representing the decadal probability of wildfire in each grid cell. These are projections based on a high emission scenario. We also considered a low emission scenario. The high emission scenario and the low emission scenario really are the bounds of what are reasonable to expect the world could produce. One of the key findings that I also want to highlight is that emissions mitigation, that is reducing greenhouse gas emissions today, while that will have important effects in the long term by the end of the century in reducing the worst hazards that we're looking at, by the mid-century, many of these effects are already baked in. The difference in 2055 time periods between the low and high emissions scenario outcomes are not particularly high. The difference by the end of the century are much higher. That finding is true for wildfire. It's also true for extreme temperatures and extreme precipitation events. One of our other key findings is that evacuations are inevitable in the region. Investments in transportation, infrastructure, and systems should seek to make them faster, more equitable, and more effective. The findings in the report go into more detail. I'm not going to spend too much time on them here because I want to get to these adaptation goals and recommendations. On wildfire, the overarching goal here is to maintain and improve the resilience of the transportation infrastructure systems in the Shasta region to wildfire hazards. That means prioritizing fire-safe road projects. That means convening stakeholders to mitigate hazardous fuels along roadsides. And once that is an effective process, also incorporating private landowners into that in order to manage fuels near roadsides. That also means proactively planning road rehabilitation and resurfacing following wildfires in order to use recovery grants in order to recover the transportation infrastructure as well as other damaged systems and properties. On mobility, we really want to focus on addressing mobility gaps for vulnerable populations and for rural communities. In our review of the preparedness of the region for evacuations, one of the things that we found was that the adaptability of evacuation planning was highly emphasized, and there's good historical reasons for that. However, that's to the deficit of some vulnerable populations which are not necessarily included in current plans, or for which there are not currently good processes to ensure evacuation. So the first recommendation here is to plan for the evacuation of vulnerable populations. And there are secondary recommendations in the report. There's ways to do that, but the overarching goal of planning for the evacuation of vulnerable populations, I think, is one of the key messages we want to take away from here. Evaluating evacuation bottlenecks as well as secondary access constraints is something that SRTA is well placed to do. Promoting pooling of fleet transportation assets is a much more collaborative goal among regional agencies and public and private sector actors as well. Planning an evacuation corridor network and installing CMS signage is something that other regions have done. In the Shasta region, there is currently not necessarily full agreement on this. However, it's absolutely something that can be done. However, conducting large-scale evacuation drills is something that is a strong recommendation that we're putting in this report, particularly due to the success that's been seen in communities like Paradise with evacuation drills, preparing not just the first responders and the workers who set up the evacuation infrastructure for things like contraflow traffic, but also for the community as a whole to be aware and to retain the community awareness that evacuations are inevitable here. Another recommendation is pre-staging evacuation resources. That's things like mobile CMS signs. And another is exploring advanced evacuation notification information systems. That's things like, I believe it's called Code Red, the app, but there's other tools as well that other regions are exploring to improve evacuation notifications. For extreme temperatures, these impacts are, so going back to that high-level takeaways, I think focusing on wildfire as the key vulnerability here is very important. There are vulnerabilities associated with other climate impacts, and these adaptation recommendations, some of them are no cost and just sort of no-brainer solutions. Others may require more thought in the communities. However, integrating extreme temperature hazards into complete street planning is something I think that SRTA can consider, in particular related to the way that different areas of the Shasta region have different loading of active transportation versus car and vehicle transportation, and different exposure to fire ignition risks. So, for example, in downtown Reading, active transportation is a much more common form of transportation, and integrating extreme temperature hazards into planning for that type of transportation, I think, is an important step. Ensuring that fleet investments and fleet management are designed to anticipate and respond to extreme temperature events is another. It seems like it's a no-brainer, but it's something that is worth putting on the radar of fleet managers in the region. When you have a reliable expectation that you're going to have extreme heat events every summer, it should become relatively common practice to make sure that the cooling systems and the heat exposed elements of fleets are prepared for that on an annual basis. Promoting proactive seasonal fleet management to prepare for hot summers is part of that. So both managing the current fleet and also procuring new fleets in expectation of extreme temperatures. And then finally, convening Caltrans along with other regional public agencies to determine when to make adjustments to things like asphalt binders that are design considerations sensitive to temperature is another component of the regional collaboration that this plan encourages, that can help avoid costs associated with extreme weather. For precipitation, one of the key things is to collaborate across agencies, that's including County Department of Public Works, as well as Caltrans and the cities, to collaborate on identifying problem culverts. Within the Shasta region, there are unmapped flood hazards and there are unknown flood hazards, especially as the severity of extreme precipitation events is increasing and is projected to continue increasing. So where there exist unknown flood hazards, one of the first ways you're going to know about that is through clogged culverts. So identifying those culverts and where problem flooding is becoming a problem at a regional level, rather than retaining that information within local agencies, is something that's going to be increasingly important. The Fix I-5 project is very much related to this next recommendation, which is to say that during a shutdown of I-5, regional traffic management plan, something that's collaborated, that includes collaboration between Caltrans and the county, as well as the cities that are affected during shutdowns, in order to manage and reorient traffic, is a recommendation here. And improving I-5 management, particularly with snow clearing resources from surrounding jurisdictions, is another recommendation. Optimizing complete streets for extreme precipitation impacts is another element focused on the active transportation element, where frequently local ponding and small scale flooding can obstruct active transportation infrastructure where it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of obstructing entire roads or lead to property damage. One of those elements is going forward, anticipate that active transportation infrastructure like curb cuts that sink too deeply with no drainage can become obstructions during extreme precipitation events that are expected to become more likely. Flooding in general in the region is something that it has a lot of unknowns associated with it. In this study, we looked at anticipated flooding associated with the existing FEMA flood insurance rate maps or risk maps, but we didn't get access to any flooding hazards associated with dams. So on top of the existing flooding hazard, we know that projected flood, or we know that precipitation extreme precipitation event severity is projected to increase, which is likely to result in increased flooding. However, the unknown flood risks combined with the unknown dam flood hazard maps creates a relatively large unknown in this area. So hardening road segments that are subject to inundation hazards is a sort of a generic approach to hardening transportation assets to these types of hazards. However, it's something that's hard to do when the overall risk is not known. So the key recommendation here is really to evaluate unknown flood risks. Upgrading undersized culverts where they're identified is also an important hardening measure. And collaborating with regional and state agencies to access the dam flood hazard maps I believe is an important step for preparing the region for the risks associated with flood hazards that are beyond historical experience. For landslides, we were not able to assess the complete profile of landslide hazard risks. What we assessed were slopes that are that have roadside slopes that have slope angles within a range that is likely to contribute to a landslide, as well as the extreme precipitation hazards associated with those. We know that along 299 in Trinity County, there are multiple landslide hazard areas. There's also an ongoing landslide hazard on 299 in Shasta County. However, the overall recommendation here is to expand monitoring, collaborate across agencies. So when there's rockfall, when there's debris flow onto roads, even when it's a simple clearing operation, to track that data and identify slopes that may be potential landslide hazards in the future. And this is important, especially after wildfires, where the vegetation and root system are damaged, which can contribute to much accelerated landsliding. And then a Highway 299 corridor landslide hazard assessment would be a blue sky, big reach effort to address landslide hazards in the region. In addition to those targeted recommendations in general, the interdependency of energy, communication, water, and transportation systems creates exposure to hazards even when transportation systems aren't affected. Mobility can be impaired if you lose electricity or if you lose communications. So integrating resilient approaches into all recovery and reconstruction projects, including elements of reconstruction that are not directly related to transportation, but can improve transportation by improving the resilience of the communications backbone, for example, is something that SRTA should keep its eye on going forward for resilient planning. And in general, planning for interdependencies with vulnerable interconnected infrastructure systems is a overall planning guidance that this plan is recommending. So that's the marathon run through the recommendations. I hope you all have an opportunity to look at the plan and to give us some written feedback. But if there's any questions, I'm open to taking them now.
Okay,
And,
thank you, Chris.
Before we open up to Q&A,
Yeah.
let me just touch base with the board here to let you know next steps. After we collect your input right now, the initial intent was to submit the finalized report to the board at our upcoming February meeting. Since then, there's been some interest in maybe extending the deadline, but we've run into a challenge in that the grant requirements specify that all work needs to be done by February 28th of next year. So we are currently seeking an extension with Caltrans to those grant guidelines, but the status of that extension is still up in the air. And now we'll go ahead and hear everything the board has to say.
We'll open this up to any comments or critique by board members. Kristen,
So Michael, if, we meet on February 24th, but if we don't get extension of the grant deadline, what happens?
Well, the board, the report will be ready, but there had been some discussion about maybe extending the work on this and getting some additional outreach and some additional talks with some of the stakeholders. But it's ready, essentially, you know, barring any show-stopping notes in this meeting, it's basically ready to go. You know, we'll incorporate any changes and modifications, but it's essentially done at this point. So we're in good shape.
I think it looks really good, and it just seems like if it's essentially ready, and there's maybe some additional feedback that you maybe specifically have some ideas that you need to get, and we can help in any way, I'd be happy to do that. But it seems like with all of this new funding, especially all that you identified on page 2 of the report, it seems like we want to make sure we meet the original deadline, and then we're in a better position for future grant funding. Does that seem like a good plan?
This report will, once it's approved, if it's approved, it will place us in a really good place to start pursuing all of these funds that are now available and will soon be available. Yes.
Okay.
And if I could weigh in, I hear what you're saying, and we will adopt it in February if need be. But board member Mazzano has been good enough to work with us. We came to him with a concern that some of the obstacles to the plan and engagement are just agencies. These are legitimate concerns. Local agencies not having the resources to follow through with some of these recommendations, liability concerns, maybe even concerns about local control. And we put all this money into this effort. Everyone agrees that it's a good idea to do something. And it's just a matter of kind of how we couch these recommendations. And that might take a little more time, or if there's any showstoppers in there. And I know board member Mazzano is looking at getting some people together and just making sure this is on the right path, where we don't take this effort and kind of squander it where nobody wants to go back to the report for all these, you know, these different concerns. So I think there's time because of the infrastructure bill and when this money becomes available. And if we can delay it until April, it might be better to do that, just in case we have to change the report itself. Of course, we can always amend the report too.
Well, I'm fine with that too. Then, for example, is it something that we can maybe prioritize some of the project? I mean, I think it's an excellent effort. And we all have the experience of going through the Car Fire and know firsthand, and it was not as devastating as, you know, Paradise, but we know dearly what we end up with on I-5. So maybe is there, you know, something that we could prioritize on this list of future opportunities based on your additional outreach you're doing, and then you prioritize a few things, and that might be, instead of be broader, we maybe prioritize.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that wildfires, you know, would be a huge priority if we could even just focus on that area and the Interstate 5 closures. That really seems to be on front and center on people's minds.
We talked to any of the other partner agencies, OES,
Yeah,
CHP. I mean, you're talking about a lot of players and Caltrans, and we don't have any control over any of them, especially CHP and Caltrans. So I'm a little concerned that we would jump into this not having all the players in the room and not spoken to them. I know you're CHP.
No, but that's what we were talking about earlier. I've already reached out to, because of the lack of perceived engagement by some of the agencies, not all, but some. The original report that I reviewed had some pretty strong language in it. Okay, and some of the language, without being specific, certain cities might not be able to meet those requirements. And if we were to bring everybody in on that plan and make it, hold people accountable to it when they can't meet those requirements, there's a liability factor there. You didn't do what your plan said you should do, and now you're on the hook for it, just like.
They're getting sued.
Right. So what I had proposed was to sit down with the stakeholders, and I have a meeting with Joe here in a couple of days, and to go over the new plan, as I've compared it to both. And the new plan really softened a lot of that language. So what we need now is we need input from the county and the sheriff, and a new sheriff, and certainly the CHP, because of I-5, and Reading PD and Anderson and OES, obviously. CAL FIRE is a player in this. So it's going to take a couple of weeks, but I'll get their input and we'll bring it back to Dan and hopefully that the objections or concerns are going to be similar, because we've all been doing this for a long time. And everybody's got their procedures and their policies, and we have agreements with each agency, mutual aid. We've been doing this, from the law enforcement perspective. When you talk extreme weather, fire, snow, right now, we've got a serious situation going on up in the canyon, which is going to affect commerce on Interstate 5 to the tune of millions of dollars every time we shut that freeway down. So we're looking for opportunities there to kind of mitigate that. And there's no real easy answer there, but we've got a lot of new players in this community and to see what they bring to the table. And that's what I'm going to try to do. And I think if we can do that and get it done by sometime in mid to the third quarter of January, then we'll be able to include that in the report for February.
And just to be clear, that engagement has happened, or it's been attempted. We've had meetings, we've done outreach, but I think it fell short of the participation we wanted, and that's where Board Member Mazzano comes in.
But one comment I'd like to make is there was mention of it in your report, but when we have a fire event or a snow event and I-5 gets closed down going north or actually south, it gets rerouted, the traffic gets rerouted through 299 to 89 for Mount Shasta. And I've had it over the course of the 5 years I've served as a supervisor, I've had a lot of complaints of people in Bernie in particular that, can you imagine all the traffic on I-5 going through the town of Bernie? It's a bit of a nightmare, and people drive really fast through Bernie, and there's just a lot of unhappy people in the Intermountain area. So I just wanted to bring that up and to make everybody aware that that is a serious issue. And then 299 is not the easiest road to drive. It's a 2-lane road, and the other night I was going home in thick fog around Hillcrest, if any of you are familiar with what that can be like. And I had somebody pass me on the right, go around me about 60 miles an hour. I mean, it was insane. But anyway, we do need to consider the fact that 299 is a 2-lane road. It's not an easy road when you have that volume of traffic going up and down when I-5 is closed. And that to me is a big issue. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
So anybody else? So
Yeah,
Leonard?
well, we kind of hit on the main things, the wildfire, the flooding. I think, and you talk a lot about I-5, but as we saw during the car fire, evacuation routes are extremely important, and the city of Reading was overrun in minutes. And I think that's, hopefully we can address some more of those things, because it is a serious situation getting that many people out of a spot when that everything's happening so quickly. So I'm sure this plan looks like it's going to try to address some of those, which is great. The thing I just wanted to ask Mike a little bit is, the one thing I find kind of interesting on this thing is this extreme temperatures. And so what is it that is contemplated about doing something, I don't know, is with the conditions, is with the pavement, what is it we were trying to do we think we can do with extreme temperatures?
Well, essentially, what's projected to happen is that extreme temperatures are expected to worsen and lengthen. And up here, in particular, it's going to be heat. And so you're going to be seeing like you were asking about the impact on pavement. So asphalt has binders in it, and there are different formulas used in different regions. And so areas in the upper, higher altitude areas of the county have a different formula than those down in the valley floor. And so you know, there's different trade-offs as far as that goes. Some are more resistant to damage. Others are more resistant to freeze thaw cycles. And so as the temperatures kind of creep up the hills, the pavement is going to have to be adjusted to compensate for that. And that's, you know, probably, I'm sure, going to happen as part of just the natural maintenance of it. And Caltrans is already planning for that. They covered that in their plan, but we're also interested in regionally significant corridors that may not be state highways. So that's one of the things we're looking at. And of course, the extreme temperatures have impacts on other things like active transportation, people waiting for transit without shelter, all these different things that need to be accounted for.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I didn't realize that there was that much difference in the formulas for pavement and those kind of things. It's kind of intriguing to hear about that. So
yeah, it was a real fascinating thing to learn.
If I can just add, from an engineering perspective, engineers base the design of things typically based on a reference table that'll come from a standard setting organization. And when you're designing something, now I'm not a road engineer, but when you're designing something, you'll look up the reference value for where you are and design to that. And those reference values are always based on historical experience. And the reason that we included this in this report is because at some point, everyone in road engineering is going to understand that basing things on forward-looking temperature projections is the standard. This is trying to give the region a bit of a heads up that this is coming. And when you start laying down asphalt today, it's a good idea to start thinking about what the temperature is going to be in 15 years or 20 years.
I just want to say, Michael and Chris, I think you both sound like you really enjoyed what you're doing. Seems like it shows in your presentation and the work product that we see so far. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. I just want to shout out to Chris. He put together some really great charts for this, and I'm trying to find one in particular on the changes to temperature. Chris, do you know offhand what page that's on? I'm having a problem finding it now.
In the cities, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that starts on page 18.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really powerful image there. Must be a different 18 than mine.
It's page 19, I believe, shows the.
Must be a different page than yours.
Oh, yeah, I am working off the full report. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But anyway, I'll just give you a few observations that are slightly different than what you've heard to date. I think the report is accurate on evacuation routes. I think that routes, we should have additional clearing on the side. You don't want to have people burning up like they did on the Skyway. I question the design difference for pavements. For an 8-degree, I don't believe that Caltrans has a pavement design that differs from Reading to Mountain Gate. I think that the pavements in Death Valley use about the same asphalt binders as they do in this area. I do think that having a plan on fire evacuation where you can take all lanes and go in one direction, that should be practiced, and the agency should know which roads they're going to make all one way, whether they do it from Old Shasta to Reading. If all of 299 is going to be going in one direction, I think planning for that and looking ahead and how you implement it is very important. I watched the car fire evacuation in the city of Shasta Lake, and it was a disaster. You know, it's 4 miles and it took 2 hours for people to get out. And thank goodness there was nothing burning on the side of the roads. I do look at your flood hazard, and I think that we need to look at the flood hazard, but I don't think you need to look at it on increased precipitation in the future. I think all you need to do is look at the past. 1964, I went through Orleans on the Klamath River after that flood. It's devastating. I mean, you look at the high water mark, it's 50 feet above the road. I also watched this 1974 flood in the Sacramento River. It washed out the Union Pacific Railroad. There wasn't a train that went up the Sacramento Canyon. And I forget if it was 2 months or 4 months, but it was a long period. There were no trains going up the Sacramento Canyon. So I think we can plan for debris flows and flooding simply based on the past. I don't think you need to have this increased temperature. In fact, I sent to Michael Kruger a whole video on a climate prediction that says we have hit the peak and we are now going to be cooling and temperatures are going to drop. I also remember 1972. I was told the world is cooling. We're not going to have enough sunshine to grow the food. We're all going to starve to death. And of course, predictions are simply on the computers. And I look at your temperature that's in here on going up 8 degrees, and you say the worst case is only 4 degrees or 5 degrees. I forget just what it is, but I think that ought to be under the section called purely speculation. It's interesting to have a computer model, but I think you ought to take the one that I sent to Kruger and say, wait a minute, based on a 174-year cycle, we hit the peak in 2020, and it's going to be cooling off, and they go back for 1,000 years, and they document why they have that prediction. I see nothing in this report other than pure speculation adapting it going forward.
Gee, Greg, maybe we should hire you as our engineer.
Well, there is. I mean, I've lived long enough to know that pure scare tactics, like on the newspaper and everything, you see the worst case scenario, they want you to react. And the only benefit that I can really see in this is maybe we have to have pure speculation to get a grant in the future. And if all grants are based on that, then maybe this is a good report. But I'd like to see a balance in here. And I have a bunch of notes that are in the report that I will give to Michael where, it's just little minor things like talking about flood hazards. They say Whiskeytown moderates the flood hazard. Well, Bullpucky, there's a glory hole there and it doesn't do one thing to mitigate a peak runoff through the Whiskeytown area. It's whatever comes in is going to go out. So there's also all the flood inundation maps here for Reading, and there ought to be a mention of Shasta Dam. Right now, it's limited to 80,000 CFS, and I think those inundation maps are probably mitigated on Shasta Dam being able to control it, where Shasta Dam has an inflow of 180,000 cubic feet a second, but they're only metering it out at 80. As long as they can do that, you're not going to have flooding here in Reading. But if the event ever comes where they cannot control it, you're going to have a much higher flooding than what these inundation maps show just in Reading, Anderson and Red Bluff. So it's an interesting report, but I don't fully buy into it. Anyway, that's the minority report.
So delivered.
Well, Watkins, one thing you said, though, that I appreciated is that even though the underlying modeling might be in question, that the fire events are going to happen, the flood events are going to happen.
They're still going to happen.
So I don't want to lose sight of, that information.
Right. That is the important part. And I fully recognize that in the report. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
I remember 30, 40 years ago, a lot of days in the summertime being 115 to 118 degrees, and we haven't had 100. I can remember, walking across the asphalt and cottonwood coming out of the auction yard, and just it was like walking on a sponge. We haven't had that extreme
Well, and the other thing
You could
I will
report
say
that.
is from my days as a child and a teenager living here to today, the weather is definitely different. And I agree with you. I think we always had the third week of August was 115
Yeah.
or more.
Or more.
And now.
30
we
days
don't-
of it, over 100.
Hmm?
30 days over 100.
Well, we would get more of that super heat wave that was pretty short, where it seems like we get more now. It's not quite as hot.
Yeah.
At the extreme end,
Or
a lot
it's-
more days over
Yeah.
the hundreds,
Yeah.
and that seems to last a lot longer. And we don't have the springs that we used to have. It just goes from winter to summer really quick. So the
Except for
weather,
this year. Except for this year.
well, it does flip around.
It's called weather. I remember as a boy, 12, trying to cook an egg on the black asphalt in front of my house. Didn't work, but I thought it was hot enough that it might have. I haven't tried it this year. I haven't tried it. But if we get to these temperatures predicted, I'm sure if I put a piece of metal out in the street, it'll cook the egg.
Yeah,
Who knows?
I just would say, I just know this.
It might be.
I might be. Depends where I'm ending up.
Are we voting on this, Tim?
Oh, yeah, so we're,
It just says,
no,
No.
we're receiving a
action.
presentation. They can make some changes to it. So I hope all the good comments I give you that you'll be able to improve the report.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris and Michael. So we're on item 11, approve an amendment, an agreement with member agencies formalizing participation in SRTA and considering member agency representation. Mr. Little.
Yeah, thank you. I think this item can go pretty fast. You should have all received the letter. I have a copy from the city of Reading. And they've asked that the issue about representation be put on hold. And I'm okay with that. Obviously, we hit a nerve. I didn't mean to hit a nerve. And I contacted Mr. Tippin, told him that wasn't our intent. And I was sorry for the way that rolled out. And we agreed to talk about it further in January. But items 2, 3, and 4 have been in the same staff report, but they're not tied at all to the issue of representation. So I would still like to pursue those. Item 2 is just a simple combining our fiscal committee and our human resources committee, because they tend to meet at the same time anyway and work on the same issues. Again, nothing to do with bylaws and representation. And then the other item is this cooperative agreement that made us start looking at representation. But the cooperative agreement itself says nothing about representation. And we do have full agreement from the jurisdictions, the cities and the county about the content of that cooperative agreement. So because the representation issue may not ever come back, I'd still like to take care of 2, 3, and 4. There's no reason to hold those 2 things up. And then I would look forward to further discussion about item 1. And it may be that we don't feel as strongly as City of Reading does, and it's not worth discussing any further, or we'll maybe bring that back to our committee to decide what they want to do about that, if anything. So that concludes my presentation.
okay, I move
Listen.
approval of recommendations 2, 3, and 4.
I'll second that.
Okay, Amy, it's been moved by Christian and seconded by Mark that we approve items 2, 3, and 4, and that we not take action on item 1. So let's do a roll call vote on that.
Great, thank you. Board Member Commenti,
Yes.
Board Member Rickard,
Yes.
Board Member Modi,
Yes.
Board Member Browning,
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano,
Yes.
Board Member Schrader,
Yes,
Chair Watkins.
Yes,
Great, thank you.
thank you. And we are moving on to item 12, which is discuss efforts to move to a zero emission vehicle fleet in California, and how would SRTA's role be going forward? Sean Tejan.
Thank you. I'm waiting. Michael, are we good to go here?
Sorry, what's that?
Can you make me a presenter?
Sean, could you take your mask? I can't hear
I
you.
can do that.
You can go ahead and present through the share screen down there. You're using the regular client, right?
No, I'm not.
I thought we had discussed that.
No. You should have me on there.
Okay, let me go ahead and share the slides you emailed. One sec.
No, I should be in there so you could just promote me to presenter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I understand.
Raise your right hand, I'll promote you.
Webinars are different.
Sit back.
No, I just want to say, I do appreciate all the new technology that you have in this room. And, you know, the remodel and especially this room and the technology that you have. I think it's really lends itself well to the information that we're receiving. And I want to thank everybody for making that happen. Reality.
I agree, Kristen.
Okay, that looks like yours, Sean.
Looks like we're ready to go here.
Is that you in that truck?
No, I was not even a thought at that point. Good afternoon, Chair Watkins and board. Today on today's item number 12, we'll be discussing California's effort to move to zero emission fleets in the state, and as well as SRTA's potential role going forward. The picture there is a courtesy of Shasta Historical Society. They had actually done a post last month talk about an early electric wagon the PG&E had in the early 1900s that was here. I know there's a history too of an old electric rail car that was in an old mine previously outside the town of Kennett before Shasta Dam was built, but they also had electric rail that would help out the mine as well. So a couple of early efforts that were related to zero emission electric vehicles that we had in the area. Now, at the October board meeting, the board had asked staff to provide some information about zero emission vehicles, the need for charging stations, the role of SRTA, and what's taking place in California. And several key questions had come up at that meeting. For instance, how many stations do we have in Shasta County? Where are they located? Who can pay for the infrastructure? Who's responsible for it? Where is the funding available from? And what have SRTA's efforts been so far? And what could it be moving forward? So first, why discuss zero emission vehicles? Well, there's a few things that play into this. One, technological advances today with cars, especially zero emission vehicles, make them more competitive today with fossil fuel vehicles like we've never seen before. Not only can they travel further, a lot of vehicles are showing 300, 350 miles on average on a single charge, but also those vehicles provide the added benefit of reducing air pollutants and greenhouse gas emissions. They may also help reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. And nearly every major vehicle manufacturer has either launched or has made announcements to launch several zero emission vehicles within the next few years. So pretty much in the industry, you're seeing that take place and that effort move forward. I think there's at least 80 models currently available today. And I know in a recent report that about 909 total zero emission vehicles have been purchased in Shasta County alone since 2011. Additionally, there is literally going to be billions in funding available in federal and state dollars in the zero emission vehicle infrastructure effort. And we'll talk about that a little bit here about funding that's coming down the road, as well as a federal and state emphasis on zero emission vehicles. And in some ways, there are some areas where SRTA is impacted by this. For instance, in our last two regional transportation plan cycles, we've had to include strategies in the regional transportation plan that show how the region could reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Zero emission vehicles could help with that effort in reaching our target for a -4% by 2035. Additionally, the state of California has set various goal standards related to the vehicle sales of zero emission vehicles by different vehicle categories in the future. The recently adopted Innovative Clean Transit Rule requires public transportation in California to move towards zero emission by 2040 in its entirety. The Reading Area Bus Authority, as well as SRTA for the Shasta Connect services, will have to develop a rollout plan that shows how those agencies will move to zero emission vehicle fleets in the future and adhere to state standards on new vehicle purchases for bus fleets. This fall, the California Public Utilities Commission also had announced a clean mile standard. That will require 90% of transit network companies, so Uber, Lyft, those similar companies, that 90% of their vehicle miles traveled will have to be with zero emission vehicles by 2030. This is going to have a significant impact on all of those who are essentially contractors in essence that provide Uber, Lyft services. DoorDash could be another one. So any of those companies may be impacted where people now will have to have a zero emission vehicle, or they may not be able to continue that business model as supplemental income for themselves. And also the establishment of both a national and state network of zero emission vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell stations is a focus. So in Shasta County, where we're at with ZEV stations or ZEV stations here. There's about 19 publicly accessible stations that we've identified so far in Shasta County. Most of them are in the 3 cities located at your hotels, your car lots, your Target shopping center, some public parking locations, as well as in Lakehead, Palisadro, and also Lassen National Park. In terms of other locations, there are a variety of others that are out there that are restricted. So they're typically for specific fleet use. For example, in the Burning Fall River area, the 2 high schools that are up there have stations that show up on a map, but they're restricted specifically for their fleets, at least as far as we can tell right now. They don't have anything publicly available.
But Mary has an AC
I got a
charger,
welder.
a welder that she can charge.
There are also people have used RV parks as another.
Not quite zero emissions, but.
Yes.
Almost there.
So RV parks are another location where people have plugged in, usually overnight, to be able to charge it far enough to be able to then continue on. As you know, we don't currently have any Tesla stations, so in terms of that, there's none available. There were some rumors at one point that Tesla was looking at some stations in Reading, but we've not heard anything about that happening. There are some more stations coming along. For instance, the city of Reading is currently in the midst of installing 4 DC fast chargers at Sundial Bridge parking lot. That also looks like to have capacity for up to maybe a few more down the road as needs are, as well as some stations will be installed in the new downtown Reading parking structure when that is completed and done. So everyone, of course, wants to know, how can I fund this and not have to spend an arm and a leg to do so? Well, there's different opportunities available to fund both vehicles and infrastructure. There are federal tax credits that are available to individuals and businesses that you take advantage of, although there are limitations, such as when certain vehicle manufacturers get to a certain number of units, then those incentives go, and then take advantage of those anymore. From what I found on the federal alternative fuels website, it's about 200,000 units. So when a manufacturer gets there, DOT says, "Yep, you've met that limit. Now no one can take advantage of those rebates unless they reinstitute those again." Also, there's various rebates that can be found at point of sale when someone buys a zero emission vehicle, or also rebates through, say, utilities is another example of rebates that someone can get for either their vehicles or for the charging stations. I'd encourage folks to check out the Drive Clean website, which actually you can go in and actually look by zip code, and it will provide you a list of incentives based upon your zip code for your business or for personal use. So I thought that was a really cool resource that's available. Also, there's utility investments. In Shasta County, Reading Electric Utility does have some rebates that are available for vehicles and charging infrastructure for those in the RU service area, as well as PG&E. They have various rebates that they have available, as well as some grant programs. We talked recently with Ayla Tucker at PG&E. She's a local government liaison for the Northern California area. And they have some programs for multifamily dwelling unit and workplace charging, DC fast chargers for fleets, as well as tentatively 5 additional programs to be potentially launched in the next year and a half, pending Public Utilities Commission approval. So those are things we're looking forward to be able to share information about as well. Where is the large amount of funding coming from? Well, it's going to be from federal and state resources. And I like to call 2021 the year of I pledge to fund ZEV investment in terms of what government agencies have been looking at. The reason being is that we've had significant investment just in the last few months. For instance, the Energy Commission has said that they're going to invest $1.1 billion in ZEV infrastructure and vehicles in their 2021 to 23 investment plan. The Air Resources Board, right before Thanksgiving, said we're going to pledge an additional $1.5 billion within our fiscal year 21-22 investment plan. And then also we have the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is recently passed and signed by President Biden, which provides a whole bunch of different fund sources that we're looking to review what's available. But some of the key ones that we found so far is that $7.5 billion for National Zero Emission Vehicle Network, which by formula alone, California is expected to receive $384 million. There's also going to be competitive programs that are under that. There's different set-asides, as well as other program funds available through FTA, through different public transit and other efforts. There's also a new element for zero emission school buses. So school districts could actually take advantage of that for at least piloting or testing zero emission buses, or considering how to move their fleets in that direction. All told, we're estimating somewhere around the ballpark of $3 billion, potentially more within the next 5 years that's available. To put this in perspective, SRTA receives about 0.5% federal formula funding in California. That could potentially lead to $15 million that SRTA could receive, or I should say the Shasta County region could receive for government agencies, for businesses, for individuals over just the next 5 years. Adding that as that's the equivalent of 150 DC fast chargers. So you could essentially, if you were to just say, okay, I just want to put that in DC fast chargers, we could put 150 of those across the county, which would be a significant investment. So in terms of early efforts of what SRTA has done, most of them in on planning studies and some early attempts to try to get some capital money for the region. Those early studies have included some planning studies with various North State Super Region partners to look at estimates for how many charging stations we needed to support personal ZEVs as well as freight fleets. Those have been the two main emphasis areas, as well as how to potentially assist the state in completing their hydrogen fuel cell network that they're looking to try to do with connections to the Eureka Arcata area, with identified at least 1 or 2 stations in Shasta County. Additional efforts have been SRTA worked with RAVA to get the region's first electric bus, which was a Proterra bus back in 2017, as well as we provided a letter of support for ChargePoint, who was able to apply for some money through the Energy Commission for DC fast chargers. And that project was successful and did provide a set of DC fast chargers at the property where the Vittles restaurant in the city of Anderson currently exists.
It's going well.
Yes, and the solar power charging.
Yes.
It's crazy how large that array is. It's pretty massive.
It's awesome.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was a neat project to see, to be able to support and see get
Well done.
completed. Now, moving forward, there's kind of 4 areas in which SRTA can participate, and I think can help. One is an information sharing. So SRTA can provide a ZEV-specific webpage that can provide data and resources for communities, for individuals, for businesses. Not to reinvent the wheel, but be able to take those resources, like some of those in attachments with the staff report, and be able to provide those available, as well as share with the communities about what we're doing with ZEV planning and investment. So if there's different grants we decide to work with, or public-private partnerships that we're working on, to be able to let folks know what we're trying to do and how successful we are in getting some of these investment funds that are coming down the road. On the planning side, we can look at targeted studies that may help, obviously, with the idea of those planning studies lead to helping implement capital projects. So being selective in what those could be on regional corridors, or also with the public transit side, working potentially with RABA and the Dignity Health Connected Living on that zero emission bus rollout plan efforts that we have to complete in the next 1.5 years under the Innovative Clean Transit Rule. Also on capital support. So what SRTA may be able to do here is assist with grant applications for interested parties that want to partner and say, hey, I've got property, I want to do some ZEV infrastructure and everything else. Let's figure out how to navigate to make that possible. SRTA can assist there in showing how that project would help implement the regional transportation plan and work towards those targets. It'll allow us to benefit by that community area to have those available. More people will be able to come here, so more economic benefit takes place in terms of visitors coming during different seasons, people in the area, and also getting those greenhouse gas reduction benefits under the plan to show the state we're trying to do our part on that. We also provide letters of support about that. And then lastly, any other support rules that we haven't identified that may come up as we learn more about the infrastructure bill and what all is in that, as we evaluate that over the next 1.5 years, as well as whatever else the state may do. So the thing we came up with is during the research, I talked with Ayla Tucker, who's the PG&E local government contact. And she had also mentioned that she, I think, serves on the Bernie Public Library Board or something. So she had presented that as an idea, says, hey, that's an area where it's a PG&E service area. Maybe there's an opportunity to partnership, don't know, but it was one thought that she had when we were talking about ideas of what we could do in the Bernie area. One of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of the investments go in areas where there's amenities for people. So when they park and they're charging, they can either go shopping, go to a restaurant. So areas like the Safeway area in Bernie, Rite Aid, or even Les Schwab, or potential other areas kind of identified. If there's willing partners that are interested in doing that, we might look at down the road. So with that, that includes my presentation. I'm going to leave it out for questions and then also discussion if the board has any thoughts on Sturgis Wokeby going forward.
John, could I get you to stop your screen share for our people calling in?
Yep. Wait. Yeah, I think you're okay.
Okay, so do we have one, Eric? I mean, Ed?
Yes, let me bring him up. Go ahead and unmute, Ed.
So are you there, Ed?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now. Go ahead, Ed.
I got to
You got
apologize.
3
in advance.
minutes.
Apologize in advance, just like last call. You hit me on a moment of unstable internet connection just there. And it may happen again, but it does only last a few seconds. I'll get back to what I was going to say. Hey, thanks for the presentation. One quick thing to add is at the grocery outlet in I'm sorry, down at the 273 5 junction, there's some Tesla pylons going up. So apparently the Tesla is putting in a private charging station there, just to add to that report. I'd like to go back and first, just while you're planning these charge stations, make the same point I made before. That the one difference is you don't want to put charge stations like a gas station you drive to fill up. You want to put the charge stations where you're going to be anyway. Which brings me back to Amy. I asked you to bring up those 2 slides. Amy available?
Ed, did you mean the websites or did you send slides?
No, I should say PDFs that they were sent to me by Jen in explanation. And there are 2 of them that PDF files from your consultant on the salmon runner.
Okay, I did not get those.
I believe those were forwarded to you from Jen or myself. Let me re-forward those.
If they're available, because just I'll speak while you're looking for that. Thank you, Jen, for sending me those, but I'm trying to understand why, from going back 8 months now, I first came on here and I said with certainty, yes, you can run electric buses between Reading and Sacramento, and somehow that isn't the impression you board members have gotten. And going back to the consultant's report, I think I can point this out. But anyway, I'll keep talking since I assume my time is, here we go. And if you go down to the 3rd page, I believe it is there. Yeah. No, I'm not going to mess with my screen, but I got to say that the reason I've asked before that you send back this report to staff for further consideration is this illustrates just how important interim charging during the trip is. 2 points in your consultant's report. For one, for some reason, he thinks that these buses take about 50% more energy than the manufacturers represent. There's no documentation here, but I really don't understand how he got those numbers. I don't really think you got the best person to act as a consultant. And then if you go down there too, you also see, now you switch to the next page. Okay, leave it right there now, but I just want to, no, here we go. I want to go to page, leave it right there, that fifth screen. But I'll just continue what that first screen said. First off, in addition, the much more important than the efficiency is the entire analysis was based on what would the range be at 70 or 80% of initial capacity. 70% of initial capacity on the BYD bus, that's after 12 years use. If you do, like I suggest, run 2 cycles a day, 300 miles a day, that's 2.4 million miles on your bus. Now, I don't think the battery is going to last that long, but in fact, it should last over 1 million miles. And the whole point is, once it reaches 70%, your consultant calls it end of life. It's not end of life. It's end of the first phase of the battery's life when it's used for transporting the bus. At this point, it has significant value as a static storage device. So you're asking the wrong question and getting the wrong result. You want to buy a bus with 50% more battery than you need, so you'll have the right size battery when it's 12 years old. And what you're winding up doing is hauling around tens of thousands of dollars of battery and dead weight for the first 11 years of use when you take that approach. Okay, and then I imagine I'm getting pretty close to my time here, so I better go on to here. The speed profile comparison also, the errors here are, first, you cannot drive a bus 70 miles or any vehicle on I-5 in the 2-lane sections. You don't believe me? Try it. You have 2 speeds you can drive in I-5. Left lane speed, which is usually 76, 78 miles an hour. Right lane, 62 to 64. So these buses are going to be at the right lane speed, 62, 64 miles an hour, essentially the whole way. Not really a problem, adds a few minutes to the length from the Brown presentation here, 65. But you'll get even better efficiency for that reason. I want to point out, you remember last time I spoke to you, we got in a little discussion about stop times. I suggested 2 stops, 24 minutes stop time. This one is showing 5 stops of about 5 minutes each, 25 minutes of stop sign. Again, if you plug in your bus at each of these stops, you get the same charge I was suggesting from the 2 stops. A little more, actually. I was suggesting you get it a 300 kilowatt charge rate, 60 kilowatts of charging.
So Ed, I'm looking here, you're talking a lot on the Salmon Runner. This report was more about where we should put charging stations here in Shasta County. So
Well,
you want to sum up a comment on?
Well, I'd like to go back to that screen and finish up if I could, please. I was summing up. The point I'm making is, by getting 120, or with 25 minutes, 125 kilowatts of charge while you drive, you only need a battery 2/3 as big as the one you want to buy to begin with the same security, et cetera. Even if you buy fuel cell buses, you will want them. I can guarantee there'll be charge stations at every one of the Salmon Runner stops, because all the other vehicles or other electric buses, all the people's private vehicles, all are going to want to charge their cars while they're parked there, and even a fuel cell bus, because by using a fuel cell bus is just an electric bus with a fuel cell's range extender. But using the hydrogen route to charge your battery, as opposed to plugging in your fuel cell bus at these stations, just quadruples the cost, the usage of electric energy. Fuel cells are so inefficient. So anyway, that was the point I'm trying to make. And I wanted to point out that the same points apply to charge stations everywhere. And I just wanted to say, since you've already covered this, it seemed logical to discuss it on this topic. Thanks for your time. And I hope you'll again consider sending this back to figure out how you can make this bus run using the budget you have, using the technology that exist. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Ed. You did get about 7 minutes, so consider yourself lucky on that one.
Well, I didn't mean to, I'm sorry.
But that is good information, and what your suggestion is accurate. You can have a smaller battery if you recharge periodically, or if you have a fuel cell which charges it, or a hybrid which would charge it while it's en route. So we do agree with your point that you made there. Okay, is there anybody else in queue on the public comments, Michael?
Oops, not at this time.
Okay, we'll close the public comment portion then. So do any board members have a question or a comment for Sean?
Well, let's make a comment about grocery outlet in Anderson. So the Tesla battery that's going in there is actually for was a grant through PG&E for that store. And so that battery will then supplement when the power outages go out, that particular store only. It will not be charging anything other than taking care of the store.
And that,
It was 100% paid for by PG&E.
and battery is totally charged by PG&E when they're up and when they go down?
That and solar, correct?
Oh, okay. So they have a hybrid sort of.
Yes, gotcha.
That's really good information to have.
Yeah. But it was, PG&E was a great partner.
I think they have like 3 48-foot generator trailers. Walmart does, and they move them around as they need them. I saw one.
Yes.
In Anderson when they had the power outage there.
Yep.
It was huge. It's just a big,
Powers the whole store.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're losing tens of thousands of dollars in food when they lose power.
Yeah, that was a great public, the city of Anderson helping grocery outlet and PG&E playing a partnership along with Tesla. So there was 4 people involved in that process to get those batteries. So
And of course, you know that anytime there is an outage now, it's going to be like PG&E is setting up generators all over the place to run, phone connection places and keep your internet up for emergency purposes and stuff. So all through the county, you'll go out and you'll see generators chained to a telephone pole. So they're just, because they have to.
Yeah, I talked with Ayla about, if you're having DC chargers in different areas that they've had more of them go in PG&E. They try to do a 3-prong approach. So they do it so that way you've got the charger connected in, but you also have like a natural gas like generator, backup generator. Also then either solar or wind also as a supplement with battery storage on site. So they're trying to do it where, okay, you've got the charger, same time you got the backup battery if things go down, and then other renewable sources to charge up the battery to then charge up the charger, assuming that, your load's not too great. So that's one thing they've learned that they try to do when they do these stations in various areas with the public safety power shutoffs that they do.
Tesla is currently researching a redevelopment of their battery process. You ever looked at an open pit mine that they've mined the resources to make batteries? That's a limited supply, and Tesla is on top of it.
Well, I heard that most of the lithium is in Afghanistan.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that if you lived in Reading, you wouldn't have to worry about public shutoffs. It's more reliable and it's,
wow.
and our electricity is cheaper than PG&E. So if you lived in Reading and Shasta Lake, you would not be
I won't say
subject to
anything.
public shut.
I'll keep my mouth closed.
Public shut-offs.
Chris and I happen to live in Shasta Lake, but I happen to be in the PG&E section, and I had no power for 4 hours this morning.
I'm sorry. I'm so,
Tree went down.
I'm so sorry.
A phone call.
No, that's why I didn't.
Sean, thanks for the,
Didn't work.
thank you for hearing our request to have more information. I did have a family member who was in town, has a Tesla, and we had that question, like, where are the fast chargers? Where are, so I'm texting, they're looking online, and we're trying to find that information out. So I think if we can get, maybe it's a little redundant, but the more information we can get out to.
Vittles Restaurant in Anderson, you guys could all went over there and had breakfast and.
I know, we went through the whole thing. I mean, they learned about, they go, Vittles? What? No, they literally came up. And I said, yeah, it's down in Anderson. You got to try it out. So we did go through the whole menu of options.
The safest city in Shasta County.
There you go.
So,
There we go.
so Sean asked one of his questions, was, what should SRTA's role be in going going forward. Any other board members have any suggestions for Sean? Well, I have one suggestion then, Sean. I think that we ought to consider developing an informational page that addresses analysis of where the energy is going to come from to charge all of these electric vehicles. I did a brief analysis, and if half of the light cars became EVs in America, we would need 50 new nuclear power plants. That'd be 2 per state, and we need at least 3 in California. And I did just see a website saying, save Diablo Canyon, don't retire it. And I think that is probably something that should be looked into. If you really want zero emission, you're going to have to go for nuclear. And if you want to go to heavy vehicles, instead of 50 new ones, we need another 300 nuclear power plants. So we're talking 350 new nuclear power plants in the US to fuel all this electricity. So I think it's great to have hybrid cars and electric vehicles, but I think rather than just having a panacea, we need to also look at where the energy is coming from. We had brownouts last summer during the thing, and our city, we're looking at, where are we getting the power from? There's plenty of power from 10 to 4, but there's not enough power from 5 to 9 at night. So I think maybe just have a little chart or something that addresses it. My statistics might not be right, but somebody knows what they are, but at least I think I'm pointing in the right direction.
Well,
Greg's not wrong, though.
No.
Even looking at Anderson, if we all went electric today, you would only be able to do probably, you'd have a certain amount of houses that could do it. There's no way they all could, and it would be less than 10%.
Yeah.
Because we don't have enough power grid.
Well, and that, I know I've seen some recent studies or reports people talk about from the utility side, like, okay, if you had a neighborhood with a certain number of houses, and you had half of those with Teslas, for instance, as an example, all charged at the same time, plus you had all your normal stuff going on, essentially you've lost your entire grid.
Right.
Grid is gone.
Yep.
So I think one thing is, I don't think, my thought here is that I think that's good discussions have like Reading Electric Utility and PG&E, because they're the utility, right? So they're gonna be the one on the hook, potentially providing all of that infrastructure for us to power not just our own homes, but then everything else that gets good. So I would guess that they're doing something, but we can reach out to some of the contacts there to kind of see what they're doing and how they're evaluating that, and what does that play into, how much we work with them on in terms of the stations, and what happens if all of a sudden, hey, what if we did get 50 additional DC fast chargers in the next 5 years? What does that do to,
The other thing to look at, you go back to REU, they have 5 natural gas powered turbines to make their electricity when they're short. And so you might be charging, but it's not totally a green recharge for your green vehicle. So the real world is not all EV and charging stations produced by solar.
Or you can just buy a generator and put it on the back of the Tesla and keep that thing going the whole time and keep it.
I think you're going to see that, pulling little trailers with welder on the back.
Well, I appreciate the thoughts. If anything else comes out, feel free to reach out to the office. Let us know if you want to do something too in the jurisdictions. And we're going through the recent announcements by Air Resources Board, the Energy Commission, the federal bill, try to figure out what that plays into. See if there's any formula funding that comes through specifically, so we can plan ahead for that and how to partner. And then we'll also be looking at other grants. And, I think as folks are interested to reach out to us, and I think it'll be an interesting time in the next few years to see what we could bring into the region. So.
Well, going forward, what's your role, or what should the role be in identifying potential sites for these high-speed chargers? Are we asking the public to submit
Cart before the horse, or are you gonna wait till we get some funding, or?
Well, I mean, there's 2 ways you can look at, the funding is gonna be coming down the road? How quickly we'll look at it? And I know we just saw a bunch of fact sheets came out. So on the transit side, there's a bunch of fact sheets that USDOT and FTA just released. So we're waiting to see, and we need to go through and digest those. Others on the FHWA side, Department of Energy also has got various grants through the infrastructure bill. So we need to digest those. I think it's a matter of how quickly the federal and state agency is going to turn that money over. And I mean, one way you could look at it says, hey, you could put out an RFI, request for information, says, we know that there's money coming available, SRTA may be situated to assist with that. Is anyone interested? Because SRTA doesn't own the land, right? And so we, other than our property, we can't go out, but that's for part.
I think that's Mark's point.
Yeah, I think we have to partner with the public, the cities and counties, the utility districts and private businesses, school districts. We could also partner, support them in trying to get zero emission buses if they're interested. And that's where we just kind of help out in identifying the fund sources and work with them, maybe on the grant application specifically to bring those projects in. I think that's where we can fit in, I think, in that role effort for those who are like, hey, I want to do something. How do I do it?
Well, it might help you in your grant process if you're able to say, hey, we've got people standing in line to accept these chargers.
Right.
And how fast can we get them to them to meet some of our goals?
Okay, Sean, go ahead and get the grants. We'll take them.
We'll work on it.
Okay, so that closes item 12. And then since we're superstitious, we're not going to talk about 13, but we'll go on to 14, which says, what should we have for potential topics? Anybody have a suggestion? I have one. You mentioned, I didn't know about the hydrogen production or fuel cell in the Stillwater Business Park. Since we're doing so much on that, should Rush Board have a presentation?
Yeah, when they're still in escrow is my understanding. So when that escrow, you have an update?
Okay, you know what, I don't have the latest, but I think it's a good idea, Greg,
Yeah.
get an update maybe from
The appropriate time.
the entity or from Todd Jones.
Yeah, I agree.
Very.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, any other ideas? Okay, we will move to closed session now. So I guess let's do, Joe, you're going to phone in to
Yes,
Dan Little, and and Michael, you're going to
Thanks, Sean.
Sean, would you ask Michael to
kick us out, right?
close out black out the Zoom? That's the mute.
I'll be in momentarily to pick up the remote.
And Joe, my phone number is 530-262-2153. Did you hear that, Joe?
We did talk about.
262-2153.
You got it.
Calling in.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Oh, thank you.
need to get,
Are you gonna do?
oh, I need to get the Zoom meeting back online. If anybody wants.
Looks like they're out.
Yeah, we're coming looking for you.
Okay, let me stop the share here.
Oh, he's been listening all
Smoke
along.
coming out of the chimney. Pope, we picked the Pope, huh?
I don't think it's gonna.
The white smoke.
White smoke.
You know.
You get that.
Lisa went horseback riding on your ranch.
Oh,
The Bella Vista
Oh, you did
with
go.
Ken Hartman. Lisa did.
Oh,
They go right.
Okay, Michael, are we back?
Hope so.
We are back.
Okay, we'll go back into
Was that
open
last?
session. And we have one reportable action from the closed session. And that's that we picked an ad hoc committee to work with the recruiting of a replacement for Dan Little. And the ad hoc committee consists of Baron Browning, Kristen Schrader, and Leonard Modi. So that's the end of the report there. So we're on item 16, authorize the executive director to hire an assistant transportation planner at step F. Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So we had a candidate, this was the fourth job offer we made in probably 30 days that was willing to accept a position, but it would have been a pay cut for this particular individual who was a local person. And I said, are you sure? I can ask for higher salary from the board, but we need to be sure that you like it. And then a medical issue came up with a family and this candidate backed out. So I no longer have a candidate to ask that higher step for. But it made me realize that since we have this item on the agenda, I think it would be beneficial for you to just give me that authorization to hire at a higher step. If I feel like I have a really strong candidate and I don't want to lose that candidate, then I don't have to wait for another board meeting to make that happen. I did have candidates, for example, though, where, I can hire up to a salary step C, and I didn't feel good enough about them to even entertain going to the board for a higher step. So just so you know, it's not something I would take lightly, but if I had a really strong candidate, I'd like to move on it fast. We've been advertising this job since August, and we've only had about 6 applications, made 4 interviews, 4 job offers, and none of them were taken. It's just, I think in 20 hires I've probably done, I've had 1 person turn down a job offer in all the years here. So we're definitely in different times as Baron.
So what is the salary of step C versus F?
It's C to F, they're 5% gaps, so F is 15% more and C compounded. So you're authorizing me to go up to 15-16%.
And that's the
more.
33.58 an hour?
Well, it depends. We advertise at every level, associate, assistant, senior, and we made job offers to seniors and so on. So we're not going to be limiting when we can't even, get applicants. We're entertaining any position. We'll probably re-up the advertising in January for this position and see if we get, maybe Kristen and I talked about giving the advertising a little different flavor in this kind of recruiting environment. So we got to get a little more salesy on our end instead of bureaucratic in our job flyers. So maybe that'll help. But it might be, we don't fill this position until after I'm gone, and maybe the new director. maybe.
Feel the wind of the trails of the I-5.
Yes, something. The wind of the trucks going by.
As you're counting the cars.
What is it?
$800 a month more on this particular position.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about was just, and I don't know what the flyer looked like, but things that speak to me about SRTA, it does look it can look very bureaucratic, but if from I don't know how many years I've been here, there's a lot of excitement that has been transformational for a small community. I mean, I think the agency of this size and the community this size can have such a pronounced direct impact on a lot of different things. I mean, just think of, and I do, the Market Center project in downtown Reading was started with a grant from SRTA that got the transportation, they then ultimately resulted in a $20 million grant. But that's kind of, hard to articulate probably, but maybe if we could think of some of those things in a, in a really small,
One-page attachment.
very small, minute, or just, like a way to just express that kind of opportunity that might have some more pronounced impact on somebody looking at a job.
Well, I think the question I have is, what's the reason for no? Why are they telling you no?
So I think the staff report touched on it a little bit without getting too personal, but
Pay or is it other stuff?
it's mostly pay, but it's surprising now. I think with the millennials coming into the job market, especially these entry-level jobs, pay is important, but pay is not everything. And so they're not from the Reading area. They looked it up on the internet. Google's not very kind to our region sometimes. We're like in the bottom 6 counties of crime rate. That concerned them. They asked about the air quality in the summer and, that smoke, does that always happen? I couldn't tell them with a straight face of, oh, that won't ever happen again. That was just an anomaly. So
5 years running.
so it's quality of life kinds of things they're looking at as well as pay. Yeah.
Once we burn off all the brush around here, I think it'll
Well, we're biased because, right, because we like the area, obviously, and I always thought, man, what an opportunity for someone
Well,
to get out of Southern
In
California.
the Barren, you could just tell them they're just moving to Anderson and it's the safest. What the heck?
Or cheap.
There you go.
Wedding, yeah.
And yeah,
That power thing,
Yeah.
but maybe they can get a battery.
Charge their
We'll
cars
throw
in
in a
red.
battery. We'll throw in a battery.
They can charge their cars in red.
At Vittles.
Nancy, I have a question. This is
Yeah.
listed as a part-time position.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that. Where are you reading that?
Where did I read that?
I think I mentioned that we were down a part-time
Oh, okay.
position right now because of sick.
That was part of the staff report, correct?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So but what we're advertising is the full-time, position. That part-time position, hopefully that person will be coming back.
Dan, one other quick thing, is this ability for you to only go to step C, is that a holdover from the days of the county? Or
Yes.
So my question up to the board is, was kind of surprised when I saw this, that we're requiring the executive director to come to ask us if he can go higher than step C. I would think your city manager can do what he wants without asking the council.
So the only time he has to ask is if you wanted to go higher than the last step,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
So you want to make them support going to the highest step?
I want to, I
Personnel.
wanted to, I don't know if we can do with this action item today or not, but I would like to, at some point, if the board wants to entertain, just saying, leave it to the executive director to make the hiring decision, what he's gonna pay people.
Well, I think that's certainly the path to be on, simply because we don't meet that often and you could lose the candidate. But the other thing you have to be cognizant of too, I think, is the staff that you've already got here.
Mhm.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
you can't, sure, we'll give you to go all the way to F.
Yeah.
What does that do to the people working down the hall?
Right.
So, but I would leave that to your discipline. I mean,
And I think most of them are most of them pretty close to the top already.
Almost all of them are at the top steps, and then there's promotional opportunities available, but your point's well taken. And one thing I neglected to say is that we also met it with the Human Resources Committee. We're up for a 3-year review of cost of living increases and things like that. So we're starting on that process as well to take care of our own, if you will.
But I agree with Mark's comment that, it's something to be mindful of. And, and I think obviously you wouldn't use it just, if someone came in with 10 years of experience versus 2, that might factor where you would.
Well, again, I think it goes back to the original point. We hired a director
To make the
to make the
decision.
decisions. And if we don't think that he's good enough to make those decisions, then we need a new director. No offense.
You're getting one in.
No, I don't.
I know.
My point's still the same.
you're right.
No.
I mean,
100%.
we give our trust in you to do that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
What's wrong with giving him authority in this case, but leaving the policy there for now?
Because the next time it comes up, then he has to say, wait a minute, I'll go check with.
No, it'll be the next director.
Well, and then maybe that's a better point, but what I'd suggest is this interim authorization. And in February, I'll come back to you with a simple change to our policies where
Agreed.
it gets.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, I don't think we can change it with the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good one.
I make the motion.
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
Sorry.
And the motion is
Moved by Mary.
that I can hire,
Browning to
Go to F.
grant.
hire up to step F for any of the planner classifications.
Okay, did you catch that, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. A roll call.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat who first?
Browning made the motion and Rickard seconded or the other way
Rickard made
around.
the motion.
I made the motion.
And I second it.
Okay,
Baron Browning said.
so the
Close.
opposite of what I said.
Okay,
was
got
Go
it.
to F, not G.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
stop it
a-
F.
no G step yet.
5:20.
Great, I will do a roll call vote. Board Member Commenti?
Yes. He said yes.
Yes, he's on the phone here.
Okay, great. Board Member Rickert?
Yes.
Board Member Modi?
Yes.
Board Member Browning?
Yes.
Board Member Mazzano?
Yes.
Board Member Schrader?
Yes.
Board Member Watkins?
Yes.
Great, thank you all.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
We're on item 17, which is adjournment. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.